Hi, and welcome to the DC Church Podcast. DC Church is a multi-campus church located in Hampton Roads, Virginia. Our desire is to worship God, connect with others, and serve the world. We hope you enjoy this episode of the DC Church Podcast. Here we go.
Here we go.
Hey guys, Cliff and Jason here, worship pastors at DC Church.
That's right. Yep. Deep Creek campus, West Portsmouth campus, both represented here as we speak.
Represented.
You know,
we can talk too. We can sing, but we can't talk. I don't know what's the deal with that.
This is funny. So this is a really good segue into last week's online campus.
Okay? Oh yeah, with the first one at the West Portsmouth campus.
Yeah, it's the first one at the West Portsmouth campus. In a minute, we're going to share some of our embarrassing stories,
right.
Being worship pastors.
Just so you guys can get to know us a little bit better.
I think it's humbling. It's good for people to see that we do screw up quite a few times.
Oh, they don't even, they see that all the time.
That's true. That's true. Maybe we don't need to share it.
No, we don't. No.
No, but this past week at our West Portsmouth campus, we had our first online campus, which went well, and we didn't have too many snafus. We have a few things that we can tweak and work on.
Yep.
But one of the things that I said in between songs or right at the start of a song, I was trying to convey the importance of the song we were about to sing and what Christ had done for us. We just celebrated Easter, and I said a word that does not exist in any language ever. And it was the word resurrect. And in my head, I'm trying to play guitar, try and remember what the first lyric is going to be, and say either he rose from the dead or he resurrected.
Right.
But I put
them together.
So it was he rose-erect. And so I may...
You know what? I actually have a rose bush in my front yard that is ready to rose-erect.
There you go. So
because it's got buds on it that are ready to bloom. So we just created a word.
So go home and...
Your roses can rose-erect.
Oh, it was... And I said it, and it's one of those moments where you go...
That's horrible.
Can't take that back.
Right. Yeah, once you say it, it's out there, right?
Yeah, it's out there.
So Jason, tell us a little bit about how the Lord called you into worship ministry.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to kind of give you the Cliff Notes version, speaking to Cliff, a little bit. But, I got saved when I was in middle school. I grew up, or at least from that point on, I was in part of youth group. My parents came to the church because I was going to church. They got saved. My little brother, who's 10 years younger, grew up in the church because of that. He got saved and baptized in the church, and that's a really quick part of my testimony, my grace story. But, as I got out of high school, graduated, and was trying to figure out what it was that I wanted to do, I went to a local community college in St. Petersburg, Florida, and my major was communications. What does that mean? I don't know.
Yeah.
I was going to communicate, apparently. So I just kind of floundered for probably 2.5 years there, just trying to figure out what was my life gonna be, or what was I going to do. And in 2006, I'd been out of high school for about 3 years at this point. I had an opportunity to go on a missions trip to England. And to be honest with you, I wasn't really, I wasn't really in the mood to go, or didn't feel like I was really feeling led to be on this trip. But I just kind of thought, like, sweet, go to England, go check out London.
Yeah, very cool.
And so I had to work and save up a little bit of money for that, but I thought, I'll go ahead and go. And I was still part of the church, and I was helping out in the college ministry that we had. And I got there, and I always tell this story to people. I say the two most important things in my life happened on that trip. Number one, I met my future wife, Joanna.
I kind of had a feeling that's where this was
going.
Yeah,
that's where the story is headed. She was a youth worker at her church, and her church happened to be one of two churches that we were assisting, working with, doing some outreach stuff and some light construction stuff with their churches. And so I met her, got to be friends with her. We became MySpace friends. And
back in the days of MySpace. Yes, wow.
That's right. And the second thing that happened on that trip was I know without a shadow of a doubt that was the period in my life, that specific trip where God called me to ministry. And what happened was we had been there for a week, and we were coming up to a Sunday, and I think this was probably a Thursday or a Friday, where the other church that we were helping with, the pastor asked some of us men that were a part of the trip, would any of you gentlemen like to preach at our Sunday night service? And there's me, this 20 or 21-year-old, and then like 3 or 4 grown men in their 40s and 50s. And I just kind of took a step back and assumed, of course, one of these godly, men is going to step up and say, yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. And nobody said anything. And it was this awkward silence of like, please somebody say something, because he's just asked us to do a very special thing, preach at his church.
Yeah.
And I just felt the Spirit prompt me and say, Jason, do it. I had never...
Or did you just want to end the awkward moment?
That was probably it. And, well, I do love awkward moments, so I probably should have just let it linger. But no, I just felt the Spirit kind of say, do it. And I just said, yeah, I'll do it. I'd never preached in my life.
Really?
Wow. Couldn't even tell you really how to even prepare a sermon or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So I just said, sure. And so the next 2 days, I started reading the Bible and putting something together. And the Lord led me to Matthew chapter 6, really the Sermon on the Mount. Mm-hmm. And the specific verse that God used was Matthew 6:26. Look at the birds of the air. They neither reap nor sow nor store away in barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. How much more does God love you than the birds? And from that point on, that verse really has been my life verse, first and foremost. But God also used that in the little sermon that I put together. And I remember being extremely nervous, not knowing how to preach. But I got up there, I opened the Bible, and I kid you not, I don't know what this was. I think it was probably the Spirit of God. But I remember opening in a word of prayer, and then basically remember getting off the platform, because I don't remember preaching at all. It was bizarre, man. It was really strange. But I preached, and I got off the stage, and come later, as that service was ending, the pastor came up to me and he said, hey, I just want to encourage you and let you know God really used you tonight. And I said, oh, yeah? Why? How? And he said, we have a member who's been a part of our church for a long time, but rarely comes because she struggles with severe anxiety and fear and worry. And he said, she came up to me after your message and said, everything that you just said, that all of Matthew 6 is about, don't worry, look at God's going to provide, yada, yada, yada.
Exactly.
And apparently it just really moved her and spoke to her. I didn't get to speak to her, but, through the pastor, he told me this. And I was really like God would use me for that. And it was at that time I came back to Florida, been on that trip for about 2.5 weeks, and I got enrolled at Liberty Online. I started working on my bachelor's degree there. I graduated with a bachelor's. I decided to go back and got my master's. And at that time, God called me down to Naples, Florida, and I was part of 2 churches down there before I came to DC Church. And so, about 13 and a half, 14 years later, I've been in ministry. And so
that's really cool.
It's been really wild and awesome. And
I think that's amazing that you got up to preach and you don't even remember preaching. Or
yeah, it's a bizarre story, and I try and explain it to people, but it was almost like I just kind of blacked out. And God just kind of took over, I think. Yeah. So, it was bizarre, but it's pretty
really cool. That's really cool.
Yeah. So, how about you?
Oh, wow. So my call into ministry was, I think it's pretty common with a lot of people called into ministry, but it was nothing formal. It wasn't like I felt God was calling me to ministry when I was in college, because my undergrad degree was a music education degree. I mean, my whole goal was, going back in my story, when I went away to college, I had very selfish ambitions based on, I wanted to become a recording artist. I wanted to be a performer. And as I got into the degree, I realized that if this didn't work out, I wouldn't have any way to support myself or a family or anything else. So I changed and kind of directed my major toward a music education degree so that I know I'd have something to fall back on if I needed to and teach music. So that was my first job out of college, was teaching music. I met Brenda at Liberty, got a teaching job in, believe it, Miami, Florida at Dade Christian School. And I was teaching school there for 5 years. And just after 5 years of teaching on a junior high, elementary, junior high, middle school level, I just felt like it wasn't what God. I didn't even know what God wanted for my life. I just knew that teaching at that level was not what I felt a piece that He wanted for me. And so, halfway through my 5th year of teaching school, I told our headmaster at the school, I said, I really don't know what God wants me to do at the end of this school year, but after June, after school year is done, I'm not going to be coming back in the fall. So, and I told him this. It was a total step of faith, because I told him this at the same time that our oldest son was about 2 weeks from being born. And so we had all these responsibilities that were about to be coming on us as parents and all that other stuff, and just felt like this is what God wants us to do. Yeah. So it was interesting, because like 2 weeks after I told the headmaster that I wouldn't be coming back the following year, I was finishing out the school year, but the worship pastor at our church resigned. And because I knew how to play the piano and sing, they were like, hey, you've done special music before. Can you lead the worship? And I'm like, well, I've never actually designed a worship service. I've never led worship before. I've sung in church. I've sung in the choir. I've done specials and things like that, but I've never actually led worship. And they were like, well, we really need somebody, so you better learn really fast. And so basically, I just kind of became a student of worship. And they said, what we'll do is we'll have you fill in for 4 or 5 months until May or June or whatever. And then at that time, and during that process, we're going to search. We're going to start a search for a new worship pastor. And you'll just kind of be the interim until we can find the new person. And at the end of that 4 months, they were like, okay, well, you're the new person.
We found
so
him.
I guess I did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of, and that was, I a lot of worship leaders, they start off in very small churches, 150 or 100 people, and they build up the ministry. Well, the church we were in was a church, it had gone through some difficulty, but it was a fairly large church of probably almost 1,000 people. Wow. So they had an orchestra and a choir and a modern service. I mean, they had everything. And so I stepped into this with no experience at all. Wow. And I was, but the part about it was that I had the music background. I had the music education background. So for me, it was, the music part of it wasn't the hard part. It was, believe it or not, it was the worship part of it. Wow. It was understanding what worship was, who worship was for, my role, not just as a singer, but as a worship pastor and as a worship leader, was all a growing experience for me. And so for the last 25 years, that's what I've been doing. And the Lord has taken me to, I think, three different churches since that time over the last 25 years. Yeah,
that's so cool.
That's how I got called into ministry.
That's neat that we all have to go through this, obviously. And I've held several titles within the church. Really what I felt God called me to, and I did for 10 years, was youth ministry, and kind of music on the side. But one of the things I love about like our Wednesdays and Thursday mornings when you and I get together is we actually talk about, for like maybe sometimes even an hour when we should probably be doing other things. We talk about what worship is, who worship is for, and that's always my favorite part of the week, to be honest with you.
Really? Wow.
That's
cool.
And so why do I bring that up is because you went through that, 25 years ago?
Almost 25 years ago.
And I'm still going through that as a young worship pastor myself, is learning it's much more than being a performer, a guitar player, a piano player, a singer. It goes way deeper than that. That's right. And I think that's one of my favorite things about being a worship pastor myself.
Yeah, it really, and that's, I think, when you think about your relationship with the Lord, and you think about the importance of worship.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we look at the mission statement of DC Church, it's worship, connect, serve.
Mm-hmm.
And Ernie is very clear that worship is like our first priority.
Yeah.
Because that's what God desires of each one of us as followers, is to worship him with our entire heart, soul, mind, and strength.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, like, that has become a pursuit in my life, to understand, what does it mean to worship? You know, am I just going through the motions? Am I just filling a seat on Sunday morning? Or is my life an actual offering of worship to him? And so that's something that I've learned. I've also dealt with the whole ego thing. You know, I told you when I first got started, I wanted to become a recording artist. Mm-hmm. Well, believe it or not, there was a process right before I got called into ministry where the Lord really had to humble me in that area of understanding that my gift wasn't necessarily my own. It was something that he had loaned to me to use for his glory. And that my value wasn't based on that gift, though. My value was based on the fact that I was a child of God. Yeah. And what's cool about it is that over the years of ministry, I've had an opportunity to work with people that are going through that same struggle in their own hearts and lives of, yes, I have a gift, but their identity has been found in that gift rather than as a child of God. And to be able to say, hey, I've been through that as well, and here's what the Lord's taught me, let's walk through it together. That's been really cool. Yeah,
that can be a hard sanctifying process.
It is hard.
The pruning away of, it's for God, or it's for his glory or my glory, and,
right. And being on the platform, it's so easy to slip into that mode of being for your glory.
Absolutely.
It really is. So, yeah. All right. So there's our call to ministry.
Yeah.
Tell me about your most embarrassing moment as a worship leader.
Well, sometimes it goes from week to week. And so I just told you last week's most embarrassing. But
yeah, the word that doesn't exist.
Resurrect.
There
was at my previous church down in Naples, we did a lot of set designs on stage, and our campus, the campus that I was a part of, met in a high school, and so that meant we couldn't leave our set designs up, so we would put it up, take it down, put it up, take it down each and every Sunday, and for whatever reason, we had this ginormous wood pallet like wall that was part of that, that set design, or at least for that sermon series. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was massive and it was heavy. Why we thought that was a good idea, I'm not quite sure, but
oh my goodness, I've got so many of those. Why did we ever do that?
Why did we do that? And so the way our worship team would come back up after the pastor was finishing his sermon was we could kind of walk around the side of the auditorium and come up from behind where the curtains were and everything. But it was always pitch black back there, and we would get our instruments and then we would walk out on stage. Well, me and another guy were walking out together, and we kind of bumped into each other, and I think I bumped him, and when I bumped him, he bumped this wood pallet wall.
Oh, wow.
And it came crashing, like the pastor is praying at this point. We're coming out to get on stage, and I bumped him and he bumped this wood pallet wall, and it came crashing down on sort of a bongo percussion set that had cymbals and wind chimes and like tambourines and
oh my God. And so every sound that could have been made,
everything, it landed on that and just went it was so
and probably lasted for like 3 minutes.
Yes,
at least it felt that way.
Yes, and me being the worship pastor had to walk out and go, sorry, and like pick it up, and there's no good transition after that. It's just basically everyone watch you pick up all of the instruments and put the wood pallet wall back up.
There's no getting back on track.
And then it was like, okay, let's close in a song of worship now. Yeah, that was bad.
That's great. That's a great story.
Yeah.
I love it. Man, I have so many. There's one that stands out, but it's not appropriate, so I can't talk about it on this video. But there is one. It was one of those things where the word that you're trying to say isn't the word that comes out, and it was a bad word. But anyway, I remember early on in ministry, the church that I was at, in the first church I was at in Michigan, we used to do big productions at Christmas and Easter. and we were getting ready for, it was either an Easter or Christmas production, I can't remember, but it was where the choir is kind of the actors, and they exit the stage and come on and off the stage. And this was probably only maybe 2 years into ministry. And I remember we had the orchestra down on the floor, kind of like we've done here at DC Church. And then all the set was up above, and choir members were coming in from all different places. And the orchestra kept saying, "We can't see you when you're conducting. So is there a way that you can raise yourself up or put yourself on a platform?" So we found some block somewhere, just this big old block that was probably 8 inches off the ground or 10 inches off the ground. And I put that, like, the only place that I could put it was like just off to the side of the center aisle. Well, the center aisle was also one of the ways that the choir had to get up and down off of the stage. And we had a choir of probably, I mean, it was a huge choir. We had probably 80 or 90 people in the choir. Wow. And so they were all walking on and off. And because the block that I was standing on was not a normal fixture that was there all the time, people were forgetting that it was there, and they were, kind of just like almost tripping over it. Well, there was one time in one of our rehearsals where an elderly lady who sang in the choir she was walking, and it was dark. When you're entering and exiting, the lights are not on and everything. And she absolutely just wrecked over this step and ended up falling and breaking her arm. Yeah. No. And I felt so bad. And like all the choir is like looking at me like, what did you do?
It's your fault.
You just, and oh my goodness, I just felt horrible. And she and her husband had been faithful choir members for years and years and years. After that, they never came back to choir ever again.
Oh, man.
And I just felt so bad. And we even had electrical, we had glow-in-the-dark tape around it. We had all kinds of stuff around it. But I just felt horrible. And it was so embarrassing. And it was that same production that I remember I was conducting, and this was during a performance. So we had people sitting in the seats. And I have a tendency when I'm conducting, when my pattern gets big, is the tip of my baton that I conduct with will hit my music stand, and clunk. Well, there was one night that it was getting really, really big, and I hit the conductor stand with my baton, and it actually pulled it out of my hand, and it went, and I went this way, and my baton flew into the audience about 3 seats behind me off to the left side, and like landed in this person's lap.
That's amazing.
I'm just glad it didn't like impale
hit somebody's
them.
eyeball.
I know, hit them in the eye. But that's embarrassing too. And then what happens is like a minute later, you see people passing the baton back down the aisle. They're like, here you go, here's your baton. Super embarrassing.
That's amazing. Did you ever see the video that went viral? And it made me think of this because of our Easter productions. I played Jesus a handful of times.
Right.
Did you ever see the video that they were doing in Easter production where the guy is in the tomb, and all of a sudden the tomb, like they had pyrotechnics around the stone, and the tomb engulfs in flames.
I've seen it.
And he's still in the tomb. And he kicks the tomb down, like not because he's like, oh, it's on fire. He's like, no, I'm Jesus, and I'm coming out of the tomb.
I'm coming out. Yeah.
And he does not break stride. He doesn't break character, but everyone else around him is...
and I think the singer kept singing
yes,
too.
The singer,
but everybody else is like...
They were pros, man.
There's like security is up there with fire extinguishers.
Yes, it was amazing. I was always kind of afraid that something like that would happen when I played Jesus.
Yeah. I think we've had other stuff like that happen, but no major flames or anything like that. Well, we did have one Christmas program where we had put up like a mall scene. So we had a first floor with shops and a second floor with shops, and the second floor was a pet store. And so we had all these little cubicles with plexiglass on them with animals inside.
That's amazing.
And
isn't the church funny?
It's so hilarious. Why do we do these things? I have no idea. And so we had a couple of choir members that were in charge of the pet store. And one of the animals was this huge dog. I mean, it was huge. And the dog got loose one night. Fortunately, I think it was during a rehearsal, so it wasn't. But then the theme song for the whole choir after that was "Who Let the Dogs Out."
That's amazing.
It was great.
That's awesome. Okay, well, I think sort of as we get to the end here, this has sort of been a podcast for people to get to know us a little bit.
Yep.
And so let's kind of close out with one of the biggest lessons that we've learned over the course of ministry.
I think probably the biggest lesson for me, I tend to be a very task-oriented person. So for me, and I tend to do it myself because I have a hard thing is letting things go and delegating and allowing people to do different things. So early on in ministry, I felt like the way that I was able to serve the people serving on our worship team was just by doing everything. And if they could see that I was working hard and doing everything, that they would be pleased with my performance and what I was doing and the resources I was providing for them. And partly that was because I grew up in a very performance-oriented household. So I felt like even in my work, I had to do all these things to gain approval and that kind of thing. And the thing that I was forgetting about completely was the fact that beyond my role as a music director, that I was also a worship pastor. And I remember in my church in Michigan, we had just moved into a brand new building. And we were getting ready and getting all set up, and there were so many things that had to be done. And I remember one of the team members on staff catching me as I was frantically running through the lobby one day, and said, "Hey, Cliff," and he just kind of pulled me over off to the side, and he said, and I don't remember his exact words, but he said something to the effect of, "Man, you work really hard. You're always on the move. You're always doing stuff." He said, "Do you realize that sometimes that you come across as aloof to some of the people that you're serving?" And man, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like it was just this one moment that just opened my eyes. And I still struggle with it a lot because I still fall into that habit a lot. But it was kind of an eye-opener that it was kind of like the Mary and Martha thing, you know? It's like I could be doing all these things for people, but what they're going to value the most is the fact that I know them, that I'm developing a relationship with them, that I love them, that I care for them, that I'm pastoring them. And in the end, they're going to forget all the little things that I did for them behind the scenes. What they're going to remember is that I cared for them as a person. Yeah. And that's probably the biggest thing that I've learned as a worship pastor is just learning that, you know, people are more important than programs.
That's really good. Mine is very similar, and I was wondering where you're going with this. And let the record show, we didn't discuss beforehand
we did not.
We were going to share. Aside from what we mentioned earlier, just the identity piece, the spiritual, learning who we are in the presence of God and within His church, and that is an ongoing lesson that we're all learning, obviously, but I feel like there's over the last 13 years, I've kind of learned that the hard way. But the thing that I am going to share, the lesson that I've learned is very similar to yours, but it's, and this phrase is going to sound funny, but it's don't pick people's nose. And what I mean by that is not literally picking their nose, but don't.
That's a good thing to do too.
Yes, don't
pick people's nose.
Don't pick people's nose. That's it. What I mean by that is, don't do it yourself and just assume that they can't or won't or don't want to do it. But actually having, the body of Christ engage in ministry as well. Ephesians 4:11 and 12, equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. Was really hard for me to do at the start. And I don't know if it was fear of rejection of like, nah, I'm too busy, or it took me a long time to just learn to ask people, hey, can you help with this? So that we can accomplish X, Y, Z, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what I've learned over time is actually when you ask people to be a part of the ministry or to serve, it's the hands and the feet, right? We all have different roles within the ministry, but they actually feel empowered and, feel like they are on mission for God when
Right.
you give them even a simple and small task. And
Right.
so that's one of the things that I've learned recently. One of our members at our West Portsmouth campus, it was something that I probably could have built, and I actually felt like it was something that I was excited to build, but I handed off a project to one of my buddies at our West Portsmouth campus to build us a teleprompter. And he's an engineer for the Navy, and so he probably would have knocked it out of the park much better than I could have. But it was an opportunity for him to serve, the church and use his gifts that God gave him, for God to be glorified behind the scenes. And so that
is awesome.
That was a pretty neat opportunity. So
very cool.
Yeah.
Well, good spending time with you today, Jason.
Yeah, it was really good.
Awesome.
And for those of you listening, I hope you made it to the end. We
I hope so.
You listening.
Thank you for listening.
Us appreciate
just
it.
Carry on and jabber for a while.
That's right.
But we're hoping that this podcast really kind of takes off and gives opportunity for our pastoral staff to share some of the things that the Lord has laid on their heart, and then also give our church family an opportunity to even go deeper in the relationship with the Lord.
That's right.
So today was a little more lighthearted and a little bit of levity, and we'll keep adding that in.
Absolutely.
But we also want these podcasts to have purpose and meaning in the lives of those that are listening. So
Amen.
Thanks for tuning in.
See you later.